All right, what is going on, UTM26s? How y'all doing today? And welcome back to another post-com video. So today I was actually going to make a much broader video about some of my hopes and wishes for the competitive Splatoon community going into Splatoon 2. But as I was doing this, I realized that one of the topics, which is the one I'm going to make this video on, really could be its own video. So we're just going to do that instead. So this topic is a set competitive map list. So currently in Splatoon 1, we play 16 maps across 3 modes, coming out for a total of 48 possible competitive maps that that you could play at any given time in a tournament or scrim or league match, whatever. And it's not per se an issue, but it's something that I think the community competitive Splatoon in general could benefit from adjusting how we play, or the maps we play competitively. And so what I'm suggesting is, because as we're going into Splatoon 2, we have 3 game modes confirmed, and it's safe to assume that the map list will remain pretty similar. Now, and it's also safe to assume that they will add some game modes. So let's speculate here, and obviously nothing I'm saying is true, but let's say they add 2 more game modes to make it a total of 5 ranked game modes, which we would probably play competitively, considering we play assuming like we do everything the same. So you have 5 modes that we play competitively, and they expand the map list by 4, so now we have 20 maps. That bumps us up to 100 possible map and mode combinations for going into Splatoon 2, which is absolutely insane. And really not that unreasonable. Do I think there will probably be 20 maps? No, not really. I think they may bump it up 1 or 2. But even so, you're adding another, assuming if they add modes. So, all right, so let's just assume that it stays about 16. And I would think a reasonable number would be between 16 and 18 with 3 or... They have to add game mode, so I think it could be between 4 or 5, right? And that is still just way too many maps for us to be playing. And so what I want to go over is potentially limiting this. Now, so what I would maybe present is 5 to 7 maps. I think 7 could even be a few too many per each game mode. So we'd have 5 set maps that we'd play competitively for tower control, splat zones, rainmaker, and like they could vary depending on the mode. So like we might play Moray. I'm just like using Splatoon 1 maps here. We might play Moray, Urchin, Camp, Moray, Urchin, Camp, and I'm not saying these are good maps, I'm just sort of picking the first one. Moray, Camp, Urchin, Bridge, and Piranha. I think that Moray, Camp, Urchin, Bridge, Piranha. Yeah, so there's 5 for zones, and we might play, I don't know, Museum, Walleye, Arowana, Ancho, and let's pick another one, and Flounder for tower control. So something like that, and so yeah, so that's what I'm presenting as a possible option. Now, why should we do this? Well, the first thing is, and I will come back to what I was sort of talking about earlier about it simply being too many maps for the players to play. But I think in terms of actually growing the scene, we would benefit from shrinking this map list. Now, why that is because currently, let's say someone was watching Smash and Splash, right? And they tune in the very beginning of Sunday because they heard that there was a finals of a tournament, and they're a big esports fan, so they wanted to watch, right? So they tune in and they see, let's say their first map they ever watch is Walleye Zones. I have no idea if Walleye Zones was even played on Sunday, but let's just imagine it was. So they're going to watch Walleye, and they've never played Splatoon before. They don't really understand the game that well, but they're enjoying it because it looks like it's fun. The commentators are doing a good job commentating, and so they're enjoying their experience. Now they're going to keep watching, but as it goes on, they never see Walleye Zones again, right? So maybe they don't even see Walleye again, because it is possible, because I don't think you play that many. I don't think there were that many matches on Sunday that you would have necessarily had to have seen it, but just even if there were, just in this hypothetical, just imagine that they never saw even Walleye again. So every time they're watching a new map or a new game, they're seeing something that they haven't seen before. Now, what this does for the viewer is it's always giving them a new experience. And while that is good, it also makes it feel like they're just taking in more and more information as they continually watch. So there's never this sense of them, this familiarity. There's no familiarity ever for them, and thus they're not able to sort of understand exactly what's going on. Maybe they watch, maybe after watching Splatoon a few times, they're able to maybe pick up on the rules, but they're not going to really be able to understand the strategies behind each map because they're not getting consistent exposure to them. So if we were able to shrink this, it would make it so that viewers who turn in would have a higher chance and pretty high probability of being able to see the same maps played multiple times and be able to gather a better understanding of what the esport is and how the game plays. Now, for how, by condensing the map list, how it could affect the actual play and the competitive players, I think if we were showing the map list, we could potentially create more competitive games and a higher quality of play in the competitive scene. And I keep repeating myself, but it's all right. And so what I mean by this is that currently, all right, let's do a hypothetical. Let's say that the way maps are decided is by like the way it does it in Mario Kart. So there's like this, this little image or this graphic, and there you can like see the selection process going on. And so let's say for the final map, it's between Urchin Zones and Hammerhead Rainmaker. And one team that's competing is really good and never loses on Urchin Zones, while the other is really good and never loses on Hammerhead Rainmaker. So what you're basically creating here is a 50-50 situation where whichever map gets picked, that team is going to win the series, which isn't really a great way to have a series decided based on simply because of the map. Now, the reason this becomes an issue in Splatoon, because obviously all teams should be good at all maps and they shouldn't have a weakness. And if they're basically betting on a map not coming up and it does come up, that's their fault for not being good at it. But when you have 48 maps to play and practice at, yes, like they are similar, like between Splat Zones and Rainmaker, but some maps do change in quite a bit. And so the positions you need to hold. So it is important to actually practice all 48 possible combinations. It's not like you. I mean, I'm just gonna stop. But you were like, there is a benefit to practicing all 48 and being good at all 48. But it's not exactly feasible simply because, there are so many. And all right, so let's say it's 5 minutes per, right? And let's round it up to 50 because that'll also account for some of the time. So let's round it up to 50 possible combinations, taking it 5 minutes, and because we round it up, so that'll account for some games going shorter. That is 50 times 5, which is 250. Then dividing that by 250 minutes of gameplay, dividing that by 60, so you're going to go 60, 120, 180, 240. And so 240, so which is 4 hours. So you would have to scrim for 4 hours to play close to all the maps if they went full time. And a few would go shorter, obviously. But so that's an really realistically an unreasonable amount of time to scrim, and that's to only play each map once. So yes, over the course of a large period of time, it would be like pretty feasible for all teams to be good at all maps, which is why at this point it hasn't really become an issue, because the game's been out for so long that most players and teams have enough understanding of each map to really like be able to play it quite effectively, especially the top teams. But going into this new game, especially if we want esports to pick up right off this when the game launches, it's going to be very difficult if teams are trying to practice, as I said, potentially 100 maps. And so if we're able to limit this pretty early on, it will be a good way to sort of make the games more competitive, because teams will all be very well practiced on the same maps, and they'll be able to do their best. They'll be able to put their best effort into each and every game. So why hasn't this been done in Splatoon 1 already? Well, a huge reason is because Splatoon being a new esport, there was really never any time from when it began for people to sort of like, no one was in charge, right? And Nintendo had no plans of Splatoon being a competitive esport, so they weren't going to take charge. Because, it wouldn't be like, no one was going to necessarily respect, let's say the people in charge of Ludi. They were like, hey, we really hate, it's Museum Rainmaker right now, or it's Tower actually, but we hate Museum Rainmaker. so we're just gonna take that one out, and we're not gonna play it, right? Like, why does the Ludi people get to decide which maps we play, right? So there's no one who is fully in charge, and obviously Nintendo tried, well, not tried inherently to influence the competitive scene, but tried to say, like, hey, these are the maps that we don't think should be played in solo queue, and thus we could have adapted that, but it's fine. And obviously that was like Salt Spray, Tower, and Rainmaker, and a few others. But yeah, so Nintendo, I think this does really have to come from Nintendo. That, or we, like, as a community, need to sort of come together and decide which map we want to play, which I feel like could be, because obviously someone in that situation is going to not get what they want, and that's just a tough situation to deal with. But so yeah, so I really do feel like it needs to come from Nintendo, which is why I think it's a very good thing that Nintendo is sort of taking this interest in Splatoon esports, because it will give them enough power in the scene to sort of say, like, hey, and probably the desire to do so as well. Hey, like, we don't think you should be playing these maps, or like, these are the maps that we deem not competitive. I also think it would be great if they would like have an esports division to sort of be like, hey, like, who would actually, study the game, and talk to people in the competitive scene, be like, hey, what do you think are, like, the good maps or whatnot, or sort of the things. Because obviously, if we're just gonna ask, like, let's say, I'm gonna pick on Dude a little here simply because he is sort of the biggest face in competitive Splatoon. And they're like, hey, Dude, which maps do you want to play competitively? And he's obviously not going to pick maps he's bad at, despite the fact they may be competitive. And that's nothing like that. I would do the exact same thing, right? So I think it does need to come from Nintendo. I don't exactly know the best way to do it, but I think that if some way in the community we can decide to create this change, I think it could go a long way towards propelling Splatoon esports. So yeah, either way, guys, thank you so much for watching today. Obviously, if you enjoyed, please remember to earthquake that like button, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!